I just wanted to take a quick video to show the status of my marginal land area. Lots of knocked down corn, some stuff still standing with not too many cobs. This is some kind of wispy corn, so we'll see what happens with that. I'm not going to touch it too much. I've learned my lesson. Nature heals itself. We'll see what happens with all these curcubits here. I'm going to be leaving for a week, and I think things are going to really fill out while I'm gone. This is an area where things don't get full sun, so it's able to retain a little bit more moisture. So there will at least be a lot of vegetative growth, maybe not a ton of yield on these, but I don't really need a ton of yield. I just seeded out a bunch of fall crops, fall vegetables into here. We'll see what happens. It's pretty grassy. A lot of this stuff might not make it, but in the nooks here and there, I'm hoping that some stuff will, and it'll be cool to see what comes up. This is the sort of garden you can leave for a week or two, and if the weather goes your way, if you get rain, or if your soil retains moisture well, you should be all right. We'll see about some of the stuff that I have been watering, stuff like the melons and the Korean melons. We'll see if they make it through this, but I think everything else should be pretty solid. Maybe the maximas could use a little help. Trying to put down as much mulch around there as I can to keep things from drying out. And anyway, yeah, this is very good coverage. You can already see pretty good coverage here in terms of food plant, leaf. Pretty much everywhere you look, there's a food plant. There's some sesame right there. See that? And yeah, we'll see if some fall type stuff starts coming up. That would be really cool. But already pretty good coverage on this side of the place. So I would imagine with this newfound light, it's going to really just stretch out and do its thing. So we'll have a nice big field of big curcubit leaves probably when we get back. But that's my prediction. That's my hope, and I think it'll probably happen. So just showing you this, making a document of this before I leave, and then we'll see how things look when I get back. Real good coverage here, and nice green leaves. Not too much to complain about here at all. Growth in this sort of middle part here is doing just fine. This might be my favorite part of the garden in terms of just reliability and bang for the buck when it comes to my style of gardening. Not full sunlight, but not too much shade either. So maybe, I don't know, 6 to 7 hours of light of day, as opposed to down there where it's getting maybe 9 or 10 hours. I don't know. Tough to say because it gets shaded from that direction in the morning. And then this stuff on this side gets full, you know, it's like boom, the sun's really hitting it in the morning. So stuff gets sun, and right, despite this, you know, tree cover and shade being a legitimate thing here, I'm pro shade. I think doing things kind of in the corners or next to tall trees is actually a good way to go. Especially if you're planting genetically diverse varieties, because then you can sort of see the spectrum of how things work in one place as opposed to another. You'll have stuff that's going to be good in the full sun and stuff that needs a little shade, right? And so this is again an example of how you can let nature answer those questions for you. And then rinse and repeat, right? Replant where things have done well and follow your intuition. So happy to be out here, to be talking to you, to be experiencing nature in this way. And I hope that you have good experiences in nature as well. Welcome back to the garden. It's now Friday, so it's been about 7 or 8 days. I was gone, just got back last night at around 2 a.m. and of course took a little, peek out here with a flashlight to see what was going on, and generally pretty happy. It seems like it's been a little dry. Seems as though the weeds have come up maybe a little faster than the plants in some places. So that's something to kind of look at. But yeah, so didn't water the whole time I was gone. I'll have to check to see what the weather, I don't know how much rain we actually ended up getting, but looks good today. It's a little cloudy right now, but let's just kind of walk around and I'll show you some things and tell you about some things I've been thinking about on my trip. Because you can leave the garden, but the garden doesn't leave you. So I was thinking about it both in concrete and more sort of abstract terms. My little trellis here for cucumbers fell down, and there's a lot of weird looking cucumbers, big yellow ones. I kind of knew that going into this, because with cucumbers I feel like there's maybe only about a 3-day window when you can get them, when they're really optimal, but that after that point, if it's gone too far, if you're like me and interested in seeds, I'm always kind of tempted to see what happens, get seeds from them. So there's going to be a lot of cucumbers here. You see these yellow ones, weirdly shaped, fat ones. The Grex continues. This is a lot of seed here. I've already done 2 batches of cucumber seed. This will be my 3rd, and there'll probably be a 4th later on. And I don't know, I may label them, batch 1, 2, 3, 4, if I ever want to sort of incorporate the abstraction of time in my seed saving. Here it is. Look, this is something that I've never successfully grown up until this year. That's a kabocha, kuri style kabocha, and yes, the plant itself is not looking super healthy. Something else kind of dried up here. I may be able to step in here. My notion of path has become kind of fuzzy. And that's okay, right? The path should be fuzzy. In the both literal and figurative sense. The path where you always walk, as well as the path or the way that you think you're supposed to go. Some other kind of kabocha looking things here. There's another one there. Another one here. And then into this direction is Korean melon, chamoy, if I'm pronouncing that right. And there's lots of those, although you can see that this area is kind of struggling. I'm going to give it some fertilizer either today or tomorrow. And there's a cucumber. That. Yeah, so cucumbers, one thing with sort of cucumbers is that they like to, if they're the ones we're working with are bred for a lot of water, and so I'm not giving them a lot of water or a consistent amount of water, so I get weird shaped ones like that, and so that's something that I'm kind of trying to figure out what to do with going forward. Because here's the thing, they taste fine, I think. And so I don't know if it's if I'm going to keep selecting down the line what I should do. I guess, I have to ask myself, what is the form of a cucumber that I want to see in nature, that I am inviting into nature. This is a patty pan type squash that got obviously way too big, but big for seeds. So those, there's another one there. And yeah, the plant's looking pretty good. It's got dead leaves. Dead leaves happen, but it's, not the end of the world. They might just be a little hungry too. I'm going to put down some newts tomorrow or today. JLF, baby. While I was in Utah, I was thinking a lot about I started by there was this article about filamentous fungi being sort of like exhibiting signs of intelligence, or I think they may have even been throwing around the word consciousness. And I was like, well, why not? We don't really have a formal definition for what consciousness is, but we see that what we are doing in nature, the trick we seem to be pulling off, right, is that if you get enough, neurons sort of pumping on the same wavelength or in a very particular pattern, I don't know what that is, but if you have enough sort of things working together and understanding each other, then somehow consciousness emerges. And I think this comes down to the sort of, the 10,000 things alluded to in the Tao Te Ching, or the 30,000 words, as we would call it in linguistics, which means your lexicon, your ability to store, arbitrary symbols and their corresponding meanings. And that by sort of subdividing the universe into mutually comprehensible units, things like words, we are able to then abstractly sort of mash those words together in the imagination. And then we can also describe those things in our heads to other people by making up words. Making up words is really important, and it's going to keep happening. And these are just sort of shared mental concepts, sometimes close, sometimes not, but it's a matter of more or less, not yes or no, when we are conveying information, and there's all sorts of words and phrases out there that mean different things to different people, even in the same language. As an example, make America great again. It means something very different to people who maybe ascribe to one sort of position in the United States and people who ascribe to another. But 10 years ago, that didn't really mean anything. It didn't mean what it does mean today by any means, right? So the point being, this is all just kind of a ever unfolding sort of version of mutual understanding of the human observable universe. So consciousness might be just the ability to sort of think in that sense, by being able to mash these symbols or associations together in the mind that that is what consciousness might be. And it doesn't seem like any other animal on Earth that we can tell, or by anything that we can measure, seems to be employing. They don't seem to be employing the sort of system that we do. And that's why, linguistics as a discipline, I think, is really important in that it is, I think, a very important clue into how our thinking works and what it is that's sort of so different about being a human as opposed to any other creature on Earth. So, then I was thinking, well, if this filamentous fungi, is conscious on some level, that means that it's sort of, labeling things and having sort of abstract notions of things. Abstraction seems to be a key feature of language and of human understanding. You could argue that any sort of human understanding is abstract because it's some sort of symbolic representation of that understanding, not the actual understanding itself. And that our concept of a cucumber is not what a cucumber is. A cucumber is something on its own. When we refer to things, that's a human action. There's no sort of magical force called reference in the universe. At least that's what it seems like. So, if you were trying to, then I thought, well, then, if it's conscious, then maybe we could try talking to it. My hypothesis is that a conscious being will necessarily have a system of language. For some reasons I previously just mentioned, right? But that it's in order to sort of think creatively, or to think in a way that's not just a reaction to stimulus, we have to be breaking down the world into smaller parts that we then can sort of recombine in the design space known as language. And sort of thinking, the fact that this gives us the ability to think about the same thing in abstract terms. Because this seems to be running, right, on, a biologically finite brain. But we have the ability to understand and produce an infinite range of expressions in language, which, if you believe, as Chomsky does, that language is the externalization of thought, right? That's really the simplest way of putting it. And Descartes understood this as well. So we are thinking. And if we think that something else is thinking, then in theory we may be able to communicate. We may be able to think about the same things as other consciousnesses that exist right here on Earth, And so I think that there's a whole lot of, undiscovered truth in the grounds underneath us. And that there's a whole lot of unanswered questions that I think we can address. And just in the nick of time, I think, with climate change being what it is and our need in the future to all be creatively engaged with nature. I think this is it. I think this is a feature of human happiness. This is what we are evolved to do. Our evolution involves seemingly some sort of strange moment in which consciousness, or at least language, emerged. I think language and consciousness are pretty closely associated, though. But that here we are, just barely domesticated as a species, probably domesticated by ourselves, by language, by whatever is currently going on in our heads. We have made life kind of easy for ourselves, and this seems to show in our sort of physiology, the way that our bodies are, organ for organ, pretty much the same as any other mammal, but yet we are here existing in a very strange way, with all sorts of technology and understanding of the world. We have a strange level of understanding of the world, as our understanding of it, stacks on top of itself over the years, through just the human pursuit of our truth, our observable truth. And so take a moment to consider that first off, and then once that's established, you can then say, well, if this thing is so smart, or if this thing is intelligent, then let's try and communicate with it. And so here is how I see that going. There's going to have to be some sort of symbolic system of communication between us and them, or it, right? Whatever you want to call the FF, the filamentous fungi. And then you sort of establish that your version of words are going to mean something. That these are arbitrary symbols, but that these symbols will have a meaning attached to it. So here's where things get tricky, or you have to really, I think, be creative in your thought, is that their version of a word is going to be different than ours. And I don't mean the sort of, in the case of humans, the sound of a word. It is not but more the sort of thing that the word represents mentally, right? So cucumber, let's go back to that, right? Cucumber sort of exists as a word because there's a thing in nature that we sort of mutually can agree is a cucumber. And we want to talk about cucumbers, so we use the word cucumber. But the word for cucumber could be jalapeno, right? There's no reason why jalapeno is the word as opposed to cucumber, other than sort of history and tradition and lots of just weird accidents along the way. And that's stuff's interesting to think about. But at the end of the day, all we're concerned about is that words are arbitrary in any language. And so then you would have to consider, what is this thing thinking about, and how is this thing observing the universe? And how am I observing the universe? And then you need to sort of think about things to talk. You need to think up things to talk about, keeping in mind that you're going to want to talk about the mutually observable universe. In our case, the soil, or temperature, rainfall, things like that. So you could then establish, it's like if it rains, you say it's raining. And you do this sort of repeatedly in hopes of establishing some kind of communication, right? How the in and out to that works, I still don't really know. I'm thinking about this kind of abstractly, but this seems to be a testable thing, and it might be interesting. So you would have to, establish, a vocabulary that could be sort of established over time. When it rains, say it's raining, right? When it's hot, say it's hot. And that if this intelligence is, sort of interested in or understands what it is that we're saying, then from there on, you just build up. You just build up a bigger vocabulary, and you're good. But that you could, in theory, then use mycelial networks. I mean, for God knows what. I don't know. The level of intelligence that is there, is probably beyond our comprehension, because it's probably all sort of pumping together, it seems, and that utilizing hacks on the quantum level that we don't really understand. Even photosynthesis involves a quantum process. So there's all sorts of strange things that are going on sort of in the quantum realm that I'm not really, I don't know much about it, but from what I understand, it's weird, or that it's just kind of counterintuitive to human experience. But that, it's, perhaps using some sort of computation on a level that we can't even understand. But I guess what I want to, to reiterate what I mean about computation. This means, I think the easiest way to explain it is that you are sort of taking things in the physical, you're sort of modeling the physical world, or reducing it down to discrete chunks, right? Things that you can sort of manipulate on the abstract level. But in order to manipulate anything on the abstract level, you have to kind of admit that it's not really the thing. And so your notion of the thing and your rule for what counts as a thing and what doesn't count as a thing. What counts as a tomato and doesn't count as a tomato. Right? This is not an issue of, DNA, because humans have known what tomatoes are mutually, kind of. There's been a mutual understanding about the concept of a tomato among humans long before DNA even existed, right? So it's not important to think of things as their sort of physical terms, because we aren't really thinking about things in physical terms. We are using them simply as sort of mental models that we can manipulate in our heads, right? That's sort of the big trick. And so an intelligence too is going to, on some level, have the ability to do that, to not take things just as a whole, but to take the whole and break it down into sort of theories about what things do and what they are. That seems to be what we're doing anyway. And maybe it's just a matter of sort of framing the questions in the same way that something like land race gardening is really about, you can say, what's a question what I can ask nature, and how can I get that answer from nature in terms of genetics, for example. So you can say, what's the tallest version of corn? And you grow out a bunch of corn. Genetically diverse corn, some's going to be taller than others, right? Save seeds from the tall ones. Now you have a pretty consistently tall corn after a few cycles. So that's an example of computation as well. Because we are employing an abstraction, right? Tallness. But yeah, although it's abstract, this sort of attribute is somehow calculated out through genetics, right? And so it's as if, you're sort of evoking some sort of concept out of thin air, which does seem to have a form because it exists kind of as the ghost in the shell, or something like that. And so what we're looking for is other, ghosts in the shell where consciousness has arisen. And I think it would be pretty cool. Maybe I don't know, maybe it would be cool. I don't know. I think that it could really put us in our place as humans. And that we could really kind of chill out with the way that we live. So I'll expound on this a little more as we go, but I think in very subtle ways, we can already see that when you do this sort of kind version of gardening or living or thinking about the world, being creative in nature. When we're being creative in nature, and not with the help of, really inelegant technologies, right? These posts, are probably pretty inelegant. The carbon footprint or the resources necessary to make metal and things like this are really inelegant. I say this as lawnmowers blaring in the background. It's not a particularly elegant technology compared to a scythe in terms of calories in, calories out, or calories in, result out. But that there are sort of, new technologies that we can employ. And again, when I say technologies, I want you to think of, like JLF as an example of a technology, something that's simple, that any human has access to, and that is really effective, right? And to go from there, with these, treat that as sort of a new notion of technology, that there can be all these sort of beautiful things that happen. As another example, I might run out of battery, we'll see. Interesting example I think is koji. Have you heard about koji? It's a filamentous fungus. It is the national fungus of the country of Japan. It's what if you've ever had miso or soy sauce, you have had a food that is made through this fungus. And it's a fungus that has been domesticated somehow over time, right? So the domestication of fungus, right, is, that's wild to think about. To think, about the sorts of technologies, and this is an example of technology. People were using. They didn't have, thermometers. They didn't have modern, mycological labs. But that somehow we now have, right, this very, pure strain of fungus that breaks starches down into sugars and proteins down into amino acids. That's why, So a soybean turns into that, right? You know, you've had a soybean, they're good and all, but a soybean doesn't nearly have the flavor of its sort of converted version, right? It's through koji, which is turns the protein into amino acids and is, you know, gives you that deep umami. So lots of interesting things to think about, right? How did they figure out how to do that? Anyway, I'm gonna get something to drink. My mouth is dry, but I'm happy to be out here. I'm gonna get some of these yellow cucumbers and save seeds from them. Some cucumbers that are ready for seed saving. Notice that they're nice and bloated and yellow. That's what you want for mature seeds. There they are, soaking in water. I'm gonna let this go overnight. Put in a pinch of yeast or so. Not that it really matters, but I seem to notice it go a little faster in terms of the getting all the sort of gel coating off the outside of the seeds. Here's a cheap way of getting legume seeds, mung beans. What else would work? Lentils, garbanzos. Lentils I think are nice because they're smaller. You can just throw them around and they do actually catch. So I'll be getting some of those. They're very cheap at the store when you think of them as their value as seeds, and they do the trick in terms of just being a cover crop, something you can put down that you know is a food plant, and not much hope of you know, getting a return on something like this, but I use it more just kind of as a way of keeping roots in the ground and getting that good legume thing going on.